Welcome everyone. This is Mindy Egan for Lawnfawn, and in today's video, I am going to be creating a card using the draped ribbon stencil and kind of giving it a circus theme. The two stamp sets that I'm going to be using today is the Wild for You. I'll be using the lion and the elephant, and then I have the peacock before and after. I'm going to start with my background first, and I have a sticky mat here. This is a 9 by 12 sticky mat. You can use any type of sticky mat or even just securing your cardstock down to your work surface if you prefer. I like this because it's going to hold my cardstock, and then when I place the ribbon stencil over the top, that grip mat is really going to grip on to all of the areas of that draped ribbon stencil, which I find very handy with some of those more delicate areas. My cardstock is cut down to 3 3/4 by 5 1/2. So I tried to center that draped ribbon stencil as best as I could over my card front. And then I'm pushing down really well over some of those edges to try and get the ribbons to really hold in place. Another really great thing about this sticky mat is it also holds my ink pad. So I will be ink blending with Festive Berries Distress Oxide ink, and I'm using a blending brush. I start at the top and I'm going to work my way down. I do plan on covering up the bottom portion of this card front, so I don't need the bottom to be quite as vibrant as the rest of it. But since I kind of saw like a circus theme in my mind when I was thinking about this card, I really want this to be a nice, bright, vibrant red kind of pop and give it that really festive look. After my background is completely ink blended, I'm going to just carefully peel up the stencil, and the stencil is going to wash off nice and clean with some water. Before I remove my cardstock, I want to add some stars to the background. So I will be using the Starry Sky stencil. This has a mix of stars and also just some circles on there that I thought would be really fun. So again, I'm just going to place this down over my background. My sticky mat is going to hold that stencil in place. And then I'm going to be using the Lawn Fawn Gold Paste. Now, if you want, you could have cleaned up the area around your cardstock first by wiping up that excess ink. A lot of times when you are taking paste and applying it over a stencil, it is going to pick up some of that color, especially things like distressed ink or distressed oxide. I did not clean up my area, so I do need to be kind of mindful that I'm not picking up that excess ink. I'm smoothing this gold paste over the open areas of the stencil using my palette knife. And a lot of times you can put your excess back into the jar. But again, if you're using something like Distress Oxide, you want to check that it's not contaminated. I did get a little bit of red on my gold paste. I thought about scooping it out, but I decided to just keep it because it wasn't going to affect it that much. I'm going to wipe off my palette knife using a baby wipe, and then I can carefully peel back the stencil. You can then clean your stencil off using warm soapy water, or if you have a bucket, you can place this in until you are ready to wash it off. Now to remove this from your sticky mat, at first I started with my tweezers, and that was just a little bit too tedious. So I grab my dried off palette knife, or if you have a spare one, and I'm going to go underneath it with my palette knife, and that's going to help release it. And then I can peel that back off of the sticky mat. It is going to kind of bend your cardstock a little bit, which is perfectly okay. And I just kind of bend it back into shape. So you'll see here, I just kind of go back and bend it, making sure not to leave any creases, and super happy with how this turned out. Then to clean up my surface, I'm using another baby wipe, and I'm just wiping up the excess ink and also that excess paste. For the critters for the front of my card, I have the peacock, the elephant, and the lion. I am placing this onto Express It blending cardstock, and I'm going to stamp it down using the Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. I did not end up using the peacock, obviously, on the front of my card if you saw the card in the beginning, but I am going to show you the coloring process and also kind of walk through my thought process in my card design, why I decided not to have the peacock in there, but I do leave in all the coloring. I'm going to be using my Olo markers to color in the images today. And in just a second, I am going to have a picture here for you that is showing all of the Olo markers that I'm using for my image. I tried my best to keep them as grouped together as I could, but you are welcome to pause the video, take a screenshot, or I believe this picture will be available on the Lawn Fawn blog as well. I'm going to start off with my lion, and for the lion's mane, I am going to be using a dark brown. I believe this one is the OR 3.8, 3.7, and 3.4. I started out with the darker shade closest to the head, kind of drew a line going around the head, and then went back through and added these small flicks. Then I'm going to come in with that mid-tone color, which is the OR 3.7, add some more flicks to extend that out, and then coming in with the lightest color to kind of fill that in. So those flicks are adding a little bit of texture look to that mane. And before I forget, I also filled in the end of his tail. Now, for the body and the face of the lion, I am going to be using, I think these are the YOs. So if you look at the picture, you'll see there's about 4 markers that have the YO on them. I don't know the exact numbers right offhand. I'm sorry, I did not write it down with me while I was voiceovering, but in the picture, it is the YOs. And this is going to give my lion a very golden color. Now, in my final card project, you're going to see that I switched out the peacock for a giraffe. And the giraffe, I used the exact same colors to color it in as I'm using for the lion. So if you decide that you like the giraffe on the front of your card and you want to color it up, I use these exact same colors. I added a little bit of pink for the nose of my lion, and I'm going to wait to add any cheeks. I'm going to move up to my elephant, and I'm going to be coloring this very in a very soft color palette. So I have CG3, CG1, and CG0. So I'm keeping my darkest areas going around the outer edge of the elephant's head, and also kind of keeping it to the inside of the legs where his legs are kind of together there. I'll be using some really light reds. Well, it's an R for red, but it almost kind of comes off as a light pink. So I have R point 0.3, 0.3, and R 0.2. And then also, I think it's an R 0.1. I think it is. We'd have to double check the picture. And I kind of tried to blend that light pink into that light gray. And now I'm coming in to color in the peacock, which I think the coloring, I absolutely loved how I colored it in. I loved the colors that I picked. They were in the BG series, which is like a blue-green color. One of the reasons that I picked the peacock was because when I had my giraffe colored up off screen, the giraffe is yellow, the lion is yellow, and I thought they looked too similar. So I thought I'd bring in a peacock to add a nice pop of color to the front of the card project. I will walk through kind of the process when I'm playing with the different designs of it. But after I had finished coloring in the peacock and putting it on my card front, I just decided it almost clashed too much. It was too much color. I wanted the yellow really works well with the bright red background. I think maybe if I would have colored the peacock in a different shade, maybe a really light blue, something a little softer that didn't stand out so much, I probably would have liked it better on the front of the card. And I just going with kind of this circus thing. I don't know if peacocks are at circuses, but I was just thinking of all these different wild animals that you might possibly see as an attraction. So that's where I kind of thought about bringing in the peacock. So for the most part, my peacock is this bluish green, and I'm going to come in with kind of this brighter green to color in the details of the tail. I didn't do any shading on that because it is a super small area, so I just added little dots of color. And then since I knew my ink was fairly dry, I can come in with some light red markers to add little cheeks to my elephant and also my lion. Then I'm going to take the coordinating die for each of these. I'm going to line it up and hold it down with Post-it tape and run that through my die cut machine. Off screen, I do cut another one of these out of white cardstock and glue them together just to add a bit of dimension to them. For the sentiment, I am using the giant outline things. So I did the bolder kind of shadow layer or the background piece in white cardstock. And then the actual outline I die cut out of black cardstock. I also made sure to save that kind of inside piece for the letter A. That's going to complete the look. I'm using my lawnfawn glue tube to add a small amount of liquid glue to the back of my outline. And then using my tweezers, I can place that over the top of my white background piece. So it's going to have that nice bold black outline, and then the inside letters will be white. And I like using my tweezers for this because I can kind of squeeze the letters together a little bit and make sure that they are aligned. Then I start looking at the composition of my card. So you can already see I have some paper bag wood grain cardstock there that I'm using as, I guess I would say, my stage. So I have that trimmed down to fit towards the bottom of my card. Here is that bright, I shouldn't say bright, but that bold sentiment. I think that black stands out really well against my background. And then I'm going to bring in my critters and I start lining them up. Here's my lion. I planned on putting the peacock in the center just because he was a color that just stood out a lot. But this goes off of me just eyeballing it, and it just didn't quite feel right to me. I go a lot off of feeling when it comes to the card making. I don't really have rhyme or reason. I just knew it wasn't quite working for me. So I thought maybe if I just removed the peacock and brought in the lion and the elephant, that is cute, but I like to work in threes. So I kind of set it off on the side while I was thinking about it. And I went ahead, I trimmed out a piece of chili pepper cardstock to 4¼ by 5½. I'm adding another piece of white cardstock over the top of that. This is cut to 4 by 5¼ and I'm attaching that with my tape runner. And then my stenciled panel that is already pre-cut to 3¾ by 5 inches. I'm going to add the tape runner to the back of that and add it to the front of my card. So I have my stencil background, a nice white outline, and then the red card front. For my bottom or my stage, I am going to add some double-sided adhesive to that. Since my background is pretty textured, I wanted to make sure that that stuck down really well. At this point, I did bring the giraffe in to try and get a feel for it. Now, one of the reasons I didn't want to use the giraffe was that since they were colored so similarly with the same colors, I felt like it was almost too much yellow on the front of the card. And I really debated, did I want to have these lined up by size? Did I want to have them lined up by color? And I ended up going with lining them up by color. So I have the two yellows on the outside and the elephant in the center. Otherwise, I just felt like it was color heavy on one side. I do have a sentiment there that I stamped onto white cardstock. I wasn't really feeling that either, so I decided to do some heat embossing. I have black licorice cardstock here that I'm going to prep with an anti-static powder tool. And then I have a sentiment that is from the Thanks, Thanks, Thanks stamp set. So I'm going to ink that up with the lawnfawn Yeti ink. That is a white pigment ink and one of my favorite inks to use whenever I do white heat embossing. I find I just get phenomenal results when I do it this way. And I'm going to sprinkle on the white embossing powder. I'll have my heat tool warming up off on the side there for about a minute. And then I usually come in from the back really quick, kind of make a quick swipe, and then move to the front and melt that embossing powder. I'll use the Everyday Sentiments banner to die cut out my sentiment. So off on the left-hand side, I lined that up on leaving a little bit of space before the letter F. I'll run that through my die cut machine, remove my sentiment, but I want to have that banner edge on the other side. So I am going to pop my sentiment out and then I'm going to line up that other edge, trying to eyeball it and leave about as much space after that last letter as I do in the beginning. And the rest of it will kind of pop into place like a puzzle. So I'm going to hold that down with my Post-it tape. I'll run that through the die cut machine and then I'm going to have that flag edge on both sides. And I really like having done this in black. I love usually having sentiments on white cardstock. I think they pop off of a background. But in this case, because my outline was done in black cardstock, I think this just ties together a little bit better. So the back of that thanks sentiment, I added some black foam squares. And I actually added foam squares to everything pretty much. I have black foam squares behind the sentiment that putting underneath that large thanks. And then I have white thin foam squares behind my elephant, my lion, and my giraffe. I started with the elephant kind of dead center because it's all going to form around the elephant. Then I could bring in the giraffe and then also the lion. The last thing I'm going to do is take a white Jelly Roll pen. This is a 10-point Jelly Roll pen, and just add some fun little highlights to all of my critters. On the lion, I tried adding a highlight to his nose and I messed it up. It almost kind of consumed his nose. It looked really weird. So I let that dry and I'm going to bring in a black glaze pen. And so I'm actually going to color over those white gel pen dots So he's going to have a little black nose, and it's super cute. It still turns out really cute. And that finishes up the card project. So I love how this turned out. Those stars on the back of that red background with the draped ribbon stencil, I think just came out cooler than I thought it could have. So I hope you enjoyed today's video and thank you so much for joining.